3-1 tonight on their home floor, and the Lakers don't often let leads slip away. They're 50-6 in best-of-7 series when leading 2-1, and they'll have to try to contain Ja Morant. Red hot in the fourth quarter in the last game. That Game 3 return, he finished with 45 points and 13 dimes, scoring or assisting on 75% of the Grizzlies' points, the second highest percentage in NBA playoff history. And then there's Dillon Brooks. After poking the bear, that is LeBron, Brooks called for a flagrant foul too early in Saturday's loss, and he was ejected. He won't face suspension. All right, the law firm of McMahon and McMenamin joining us now on SportsCenter, and Tim McMahon covering the Grizzlies as Brooks will be back on the floor in Game 4 tonight. How critical is his role in getting Memphis back even in this series?
Say what you want about Dillon Brooks and all the bull stuff, to borrow LeBron James's phrase, but he is one of the best defenders in the league. The question is, how much is he going to hurt the Grizzlies or help on the other end of the floor? The way the Lakers were playing him in Game 3, they were daring him to beat them with his jump shot. Please take those jumpers, sagging far off of him, clogging up the spacing for Ja Morant and the rest of the Grizzlies. They need Dillon Brooks to hit those wide open shots, A, to open things up, and B, every brick by Dillon Brooks is gasoline on the fire for these Lakers fans.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Meanwhile, Dave McMenamin is covering the Lakers, and Dave, LeBron hasn't been this team's top option in the series. It's Anthony Davis. Where is he making his biggest impact?
Well, Kev, here's some names for you. Hakeem Olajuwon, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Tim Duncan. Those are the only players in NBA playoff history through the first 3 games of the series that have put up the type of numbers that Anthony Davis is doing so far against the Grizzlies. Obviously, he's an impact on the offensive end, but also the defensive end. And the Lakers, since they acquired Anthony Davis, traded all those young assets to get him in here, at some point, the succession plan was him to take over for LeBron James. It's finally happening. And Anthony Davis says he embraces that role, but because of his team-centric style of play alongside LeBron's, it doesn't mean that every night he's going to be putting up 30 points. He said Game 4 could belong to LeBron James. Both those guys, all they care about this stage of their career is just getting the win.
Make a great case here. L.A. currently a 4.5-point favorite at home. Dave, Tim, thank you so much.
L.A., where the Lakers are up on the Grizz 2-1. Dillon Brooks, your boy, was ejected from Game 3. Eject this. But will not be suspended for a shot to LeBron's nether region. After publicly declaring that he pokes bears and calling LeBron old, Brooks now says the media and the fans have made him the villain. Tony, as the teams take the court for Game 4 tonight, is Dillon Brooks helping or hurting his Grizzlies?
I'm glad Dillon Brooks is my boy now. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Since he began opening his yap, the Grizzlies are 0-1. You'll remember that it was after Game 2 that he said LeBron is old, the game they won. After Game 2, LeBron is old and I like to poke the bears, which I didn't really understand because it wasn't like LeBron was declared ineligible for the rest of the series. I didn't understand that. So let me get to my notes here. So in Game 3, Brooks has a bad game, right? And he gets tossed. He hits LeBron in the groin, and he gets tossed. And to that point, he's 3 for 13 from the field, right? So we're together on that, and he leaves the game. Now, if you're counting, this is the second time this year that he's been ejected for hitting somebody in the groin. That's only if you're counting.
Yeah.
Mike, I would have suspended him, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain why here. He glories in this whole thing with LeBron. He glories in being the center of attention. He swims in this stuff. And he churns up the water, I believe, unnecessarily. I believe he raised the temperature in the room beyond where it necessarily ought to be. And if I were Joe Dumars, I'd be looking at Dillon Brooks' behavior in the same way that I look at Draymond Green's, because he, too, is a recidivist. Didn't he knock Gary Payton II out of the playoffs last year? Don't people look at him in that same sort of way? So that's my feeling about that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care about the suspension. Let me just attack Mr. Brooks this way. First of all, he's a guy who a couple of years ago averaged 25 points a game in the playoffs. Now he can barely get to 11, right? His shooting percentage is below ground. It's so bad. So he's hurting his team because he's been bad. He isn't a defensive specialist only. He can play on the offensive end and be effective, even be a little bit prolific, and he's done nothing. But here's what's worse than that. I wouldn't have suspended him. It was a basketball move. I wouldn't have suspended him. Here's what's worse than that. There's nothing lamer and softer and more gutless than running your mouth and then blaming other people because you are too scared to stand by your words. That's a gutless act. I didn't think Dillon Brooks was gutless, but he appears to be, particularly when he puts on the big stupid glasses. Don't run your mouth. You can't even do this on any playground in America. Not the ones I grew up on. You run your mouth, you stand by your words, or you are a chump. And right now, Dillon Brooks looks like a chump. That's what he is. And LeBron James and the Lakers ought to take care of him and them. Although Ja being back and able to score 40 changes that whole thing, Dillon Brooks, you can't stand by your words? You're scared to stand by your words. Please, get out.
Let's go to hockey. Let's go to hockey.
People out there that say maybe you shouldn't do that with one of the better players in the game. I guess what were you thinking?
I don't care. He's old.
He didn't poke the bear at all. He pulled honey on him. That's what Dillon Brooks did. He pulled honey on himself.
I'm here for the bullet. I'm ready to play, and that's it. I appreciate it.
And back the other way, 3-on-1. LeBron taking flight. Oh, set it with his chest.
I've been doing this too long. I'm making enough statements.
He's been issued a flagrant foul penalty too and has been ejected from the game.
Yeah, see you later.
Fans making me a villain. The media making me a villain. That just creates a whole different persona on me. So now you think I intended to hit LeBron James in the nuts. I'm playing basketball, I'm a basketball player.
This is Hollywood, after all. The stage is set for Game 4 as we get you ready. Ramona Shelburne back with us, as well as Tim McMahon, who's covering the Grizzlies for this series. So, Ramona, last game it was a blowout, right? Despite Ja Morant scoring 22 straight, which is wild in the fourth quarter, we saw all that was made of Dillon Brooks, right? But his rhetoric, his behavior, it's part of what makes the Grizzlies. But how are they viewing this internally?
Well, every time you ask a question, every time Dillon Brooks does something like this, you go to Tyus and you go to Desmond Bane, because those are the two adults that they always trust in front of the cameras. And they always say, we got our guys back. Yeah. But at some point, you kind of have to wonder, why isn't Dillon answering these questions, right? Like, he's the one who puts it out there. And Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane, Steven Adams used to be in that role before he got hurt. It comes to a point where this is where you need some veterans on this team, some guys that kind of take the load off there, because it's always the same two guys who are the mature ones. Tyus Jones has a couple of kids. He's he calls himself an old soul, but they're always having to answer for and back up the talk of Dillon Brooks and sometimes the talk of Ja Morant.
Well, I imagine, though, at the end of the day, this is a fine line, because it's what makes the Grizzlies, right? This is what they do. But then, when you look at the box score, and Dillon Brooks is 1 of 7 on jumpers, how is that reverberating?
Yeah, if you bark, you've got to bite. And look, you can't brick. Just straight up. And the way that the Lakers are playing him, those were invitation jumpers, right? They're packing the paint, sagging off Dillon Brooks and saying, if you want to beat us with your three-point shot, prove that you can do it. They're not guarding him. Now, you've got the crowd that's on him. You've got that whole thing. If Dillon Brooks is going to silence the crowd, he has to hit jump shots, because those shots will be there for him. And look, I don't think it's a coincidence that Ja Morant really got rolling when Dillon Brooks was off the floor. As much as he gives them on defense, and he is legitimately one of the best and most versatile defenders in the league, he has hurt them in this series offensively.
If you bark, you got to bite. You can't brick.
That was
a line, Tim McMahon. That was a flourish. All right, but at the end of the day, he is an unrestricted free agent this summer. Obviously, you're referring to the fact that he got ejected in that last game that we saw. Should we expect Dillon to be a cornerstone of this franchise for years to come?
Stay tuned. This is going to be a very difficult decision for the Grizzlies front office this summer, as you said, when he becomes a free agent. But look, they've showed their cards. They tried to engage the Raptors in conversations about OG Anunoby. They threw 4 first-round picks at the Brooklyn Nets and said, we want Mikal Bridges. They drafted Zaire Williams in the first round, trading up to get him. They drafted another small forward this year in David Roddy. Neither of those guys are ready for that role, but there's a lot that comes along with Dillon Brooks. If he's not going to be part of this, they have to find a way to replace him. And again, we're talking about a guy who is guarding LeBron James in this series.